for his sister's education and blames him for ruining her future. But OP has reasons for that, as he accidentally heard what his sister is saying about him. Listen to the story to find out, and of course to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, guys, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. So, a few weeks ago, my family met for a big family dinner. My parents had a hard time. I was the oldest of my siblings and way more successful than my parents. This was because when virus started and the economy had a huge recession, my father, who was the breadwinner of the household, lost his job. Since I had a business and worked from home, the recession didn't hit me that hard. So I started to support my family financially, which included paying for the education of my younger siblings, as my parents couldn't afford that anymore. I had no problem with that. Back to the family meeting. Besides me, our grandparents, my aunt and her husband, and my younger cousin came as well. I had a great relationship with all my siblings. I have 3, besides my sister, who was the oldest of them. It wasn't hate either. We just never really had anything to do with each other, and basically ignored each other. Even when I would visit, she'd just lock herself in her room while I spent time with my younger brothers. During the family dinner, she didn't say a word. She just quietly sat there and ate her food. She then went to her room and took my younger cousin with her. After we finished eating, my brothers ran into their rooms and I followed them. I passed my sister's bedroom and overheard her talking to my cousin. She told him how I don't care about her and that I am an ignorant a-hole who only cares about my brothers and that she hated me and wished I would just disappear. I was sad that she thought about me this way, but I wanted to talk to her. I waited a few minutes so she wouldn't suspect me of listening before I knocked at her door and asked if we could talk. She told me she doesn't want to talk to me. I asked again, but she refused. I later talked to my cousin, who told me that she has told him that she said the same thing not only to him, but to many other people, but of course no one said anything. As a consequence, I pulled the strings and no longer paid for her education, and my parents are furious with me and calling me an a-hole for doing so. I would ruin her future, they said. I gave her the opportunity to talk to me. I'd probably even consider paying for it again if she just apologizes and just talks to me about what's her problem with me. I think this is the only way to build up enough pressure so that she finally talks to me. It's not like I hate her. I want to teach her a lesson. Some might say it's probably just her puberty hormones, but she behaves this way towards me even before she got into puberty. She always was distant. By the way, I still continue to pay for my other siblings' education. So, am I the a-hole? Well, technically OP is not in the wrong here, because he is not morally obligated to pay for any of his siblings' education. However, I would be interested to know why she thinks OP doesn't care about her and only cares for his brothers. Jeopardizing her education isn't going to make her talk to OP. It's going to reinforce her opinion that you don't care. If you want to get to the bottom of this, you need to try other methods. Let's see what the community has to say about the matter. Throw says, not the a-hole. You're not your sibling's parent. You aren't obligated to pay for anything of theirs. You are gifting them these things. If they decide to look a gift horse in the mouth and treat you like crap, then they can deal with the fallout of that choice. Pink Pineapple 09 says, not the a-hole. You asked your sister not once but twice to talk, and she refused to talk. Your sister needs to understand that communication is important. This is the consequence of her own actions. You are teaching her a valuable lesson of how life actually works. NetOdd8878 says, not the a-hole. It is your money. They are not entitled to it. You gave your sister an opportunity, but she didn't want it. And what your sister said was really mean. She said it to a lot of people, and nobody said anything, so not the a-hole. My husband, 32 male, and I have been married for 8 years. Our relationship has been great for the most part, but 4 years ago he got a promotion. He works for his family's business, which came with an assistant, secretary, who I feel has been trying to sabotage our relationship. I'll give some examples on things she's done. When I was pregnant, I experienced some really bad cramping, and I was terrified I was miscarrying. I already had before. I called my husband, and his phone was switched off, not usual when he has a meeting. So I ended up calling his secretary to ask for him, and she told me he had asked not to forward any of my calls to him. When I tried to explain the situation to her, she kept insisting she couldn't help and hung up. I ended up calling my sister, and she came over to go to the hospital with me. The baby was fine, but the emotional trauma was awful. We ended up having a massive fight when he got home from work, in which he denied ever telling her not to forward my calls to him. He ended up speaking to her about it after, but she continues to be difficult whenever I try to get in touch with my husband, only in emergencies. When we have plans which are in my husband's diary, she moves them to a later time, so he essentially stands me up. She has even moved checkup appointments during my pregnancy, which he promised to show up to. This has naturally led to many arguments. Before I had our son, I used to occasionally go on business trips with my husband. He would inform her that I would be attending too, and ask her to make the necessary arrangements, and she would accidentally forget, which would mean I had booked time off work for nothing. She'd then proceed to brag about how much fun they had when I would next see or speak to her. There are a lot of other instances, but these are the ones which frustrate me the most. Am I being delusional, or is she being weird? Edit. I didn't mention it originally, but she's the daughter of my mother-in-law's friend, if that makes a difference. In my opinion, she's not the issue. OP's husband is. If he truly put a foot down, this would not have happened more than 2 times. He is using her as an excuse. I think he is cheating on OP with her. There's nothing else that would make any of this make sense. She didn't forget to book OP in for the trips. I'm sure they are sharing a room. Let's see if the community agrees with me. D-Save says, these are acts which should result in her being disciplined at work, potentially being fired. If that is not happening, your husband approves of her actions. V-Techie Yo says, have you considered that maybe it's not the secretary? As most people have pointed out, I find it surprising that your husband has not disciplined or fired this person for being very, very bad at their job. It's possible he can't fire them because of some family connection or company politics. But unless he tells you that explicitly, it sounds like he's complicit in these actions and just blaming the secretary. If I found out my admin told my wife that I wouldn't take her calls when I made no such statement, I'd fire them on the spot, especially with a health or pregnancy-related issue. You need to consider the possibility that your husband is making these decisions himself and using the secretary as a scapegoat. Hangry Vegan says, I'm an executive assistant for a married old guy, and I always make sure his wife's communication goes through or is answered ASAP. If she were having an emergency, I'd interrupt any meeting he was having, via text, messenger, me busting in and yelling, etc., to let him know. Something is wrong with this woman. She's either incompetent or deceitful. My older sister Sierra, 28 female, has been engaged for like 4 years now. She's finally due to get married next year. I, 27 female, got engaged recently and plan to marry next year also. Sierra decided because of this, we should have a double wedding. I turned her down. She begged. She asked why. I told her she would invite people to her wedding I do not want at mine. She's like, it would repair the family, because the people in question are Mom, her husband and his family, who I am no contact with, and that would mean they would be there for both. She even tried to rope Dad in, who told her he would not push me. Some background in case people wonder. Mom left Dad while she was pregnant with me. She was unhappy with him, blah blah blah. She essentially admitted to me years after that she wanted someone with a better paid job. Met her husband while she and Dad were going through the divorce, and he moved in as soon as the divorce was final. They got married when my sister and I were too young to remember. My sister adores him and his family. I always saw him as a jerk who felt like he should have been able to push Dad out and take over. The fact that Dad fixes cars for a living was something that he and his family commented negatively over the years. Mostly they did it when my sister and I weren't around, and I would snoop, but sometimes a comment would fly out in front of us that maybe wasn't as bad but was still there. He would try to bribe me as well. He'd tell me he would pay for me to do the nicer art classes if I called him Dad. He offered to buy me $300 worth of art supplies if I called him Dad in front of my dad and hugged him. He and Mom would even have my sister trying to correct me when I wouldn't call him Dad, or when I would use his name and say I only had one dad. Dad had equal custody of us, and I was always much closer to him. Sierra was close to him as well. I would say I was closer. In the end, all the crap talk about Dad's job and the bribes made me dislike both my mom and her husband, and also his family, and I am no contact with them. Back to the wedding stuff and my sister trying to convince me that having them there will be a good thing, and us having a double wedding will save me inviting them, and yet they will see their baby and grandbaby get married anyway. She told me it would be so much fun. I told her that there was nothing that would convince me of that, and nothing that would make me want to have a double wedding with her. That I would rather have a small single wedding than deal with the BS of them seeing me get married. She was upset at first. I thought she'd get over it, but she told me I'm spoiling the excitement on her knowing how much I hate them, and knowing I would let it stop me from having a double wedding. She claimed the guest list should not be the reason I turned down a double wedding so harshly, and that I am being bratty about it. Am I the a-hole? In my opinion, OP is not an a-hole without question. I think OP's sister is blind to how OP and her dad were treated, and she definitely has no claim to tell OP what to do with her wedding. My wedding, my rules. OP needs to do it her way and keep her mother and stepdad away. OP shouldn't try to repair what she didn't break. Let's hear the community's opinion. Stormeal Ways says, not the a-hole. Sounds more like she wants to split the cost. She knows you're no contact, and just because she wants to heal the family doesn't mean you have to agree. What they did, trying to get you to hurt your dad by calling stepdad dad, is beyond disgusting. SlightNail5869 says, what is it with people thinking that they can tell other people what to do with their wedding? I can understand family having a small amount of input, but deciding that you're having a double wedding and inviting a bunch of people that you don't like is a bit much. I would just tell her that it's not happening, not to mention it again. If she does mention it again, you won't even bother responding. This isn't even worth your energy. I hope that you have the nice, intimate wedding that you want, with the people that you want, not the a-hole. Falcon Jaeger says, not the a-hole. Your wedding, your choice. If your sister can't wrap her head around the reality that you don't want contact with your mother, her husband, and his family, you should recommend a shrink to your sister, as she's willfully ignoring reality. My 23 female, brother, 30 male, had been planning a wedding for his 26 female fiancé for a year. My brother and I have never been close because of our age difference, but it's not like we don't get along. They'd been dating for a few years, and his fiancé wanted to have this giant wedding with all of our family and hers, plus friends, plus ones, etc. But they really couldn't afford it. They finally agreed to have this wedding at a venue that is somewhat small, and they can afford it, but it does not allow for more than 100 people in it at a time. I guess her and her parents were mad about this, because more than 100 people just in her family friends list need to be invited, and they're plus ones. So they made a compromise where some guests would be a part of the 100, and the rest of the guests would be in the overflow wedding. So they would still be invited, but wouldn't mess up this limit the venue has. The guests in that overflow room would watch the ceremony on a live stream video projected onto this movie theater nearby the venue that they would rent out. I guess renting a room in a theater is cheaper. I don't know. Apparently her list is the most important, so I was invited to the overflow wedding. I was pissed about this, and I asked him what this was about when we were at my dad's birthday party 2 weeks after I got the invite. He said it was fine because I could go to the reception. I told him that it was the principal. I am his immediate family, so I should be able to go to the normal venue. He told me that he needs to make her family happy and that I should understand. Then he said we're not that close a family anyway, and that she needs to be happy on her wedding. So basically, I told him that I will not be attending the wedding and that I should get to go to the main ceremony. He got mad at me, and we were yelling, fighting. Multiple people at the party yelled at me for making a scene, and that it is her day, and I should be grateful for even getting to go to the overflow wedding. So, am I the a-hole? Wow, overflow wedding. That is something new. And of course, OP is not in the wrong for refusing to attend. I would refuse to attend as well, and I wouldn't send a gift because that is just rude. Let's see what the community says. Atomic Golf Cart says, not the a-hole. If there are 100 people in their lives who are more important to them than you, then they won't miss you at the wedding. This whole overflow reception feels like a shameless gift grab. If you're watching on live stream from a completely different place, it's not like it makes any difference to them whether you're there or not. Smudgican says, not the a-hole. First of all, it's not just her day. The minimum the bride needs for a wedding is a groom, or another bride, if that's the way she sails, which makes it their day. Secondly, it's just common sense to have a wedding you can afford. If you can only afford 100 people, trim the list. And finally, an overflow wedding, with only select guests being at the actual venue, is an idea that would give Miss Manners the vapors. Unless you're marrying the King of England, your marriage shouldn't be televised. Ditto Head Forever says, you're not the a-hole, but don't let this get under your skin too much. I'm sure you'll be invited to the real deal for a second wedding. My ex, Louise, 42 female, and I, 46 male, had Ed, 22 male. We tried to make it work, but ended up splitting when he was 13. It was an amicable split, and we never got married, so did not have a formal childcare agreement drawn up. It was decided Louise would have Ed for the weekdays, and I would have him on weekends, and this continued until he turned 18. Ed started living with Louise and her new partner of a year, Tom, 45 male, after he graduated. I guess Tom thought of the idea to charge Ed to live with them because I know Louise would never think of it. I think it's ridiculous to charge your own child money to live with you. I wouldn't dream of asking him to pay rent. I would rather Ed save his money to live on his own or move in with his long-term girlfriend. Ed was complaining to me that Louise and Tom wanted to charge him $1,000 to live with them per month down in London, which I thought was ridiculous. It isn't like they need the money, as Louise makes £90,000, and she's not told me the exact amount Tom makes. However, it's more than Louise earns. They both work in finance, so I'm assuming they earn £200,000 between them both. I think they're being unfair, so I told Ed that I would pay his rent and he can save up and move out as soon as he can. I kept this up for a few months until Louise messaged me about Ed. She thought it was suspicious that he was able to pay them the $1,000 without complaint and asked if he was doing anything that she needed to know about. We got into it then and there when I said it was none of her business if she's going to insist that he needlessly pays them $1,000 every month, and I admitted I was the one paying. She was outraged, said I was undermining her and Tom's parenting, and it isn't my utilities Ed is using. Am I the a-hole? I don't think I'm undermining her parenting because Ed's rent is being paid, just not by him. I have never tried to convince them not to charge him rent. I just decided to pay instead. Not the a-hole. Paying rent to parents seems to be a very controversial topic here, based on other comments and threads about this. Americans will say you need to charge your children's rent. Eastern Europeans will say you shouldn't. So I think your final judgment will depend a lot on where most commenters are from. Where I'm from, decent parents don't charge their children rent. None of my friends coming from good families were charged rent. I only know of one person who charged her children rent, and guess their relationship. They don't have a close one. It sends the wrong message. I also don't agree with parents trying to parent an adult child. If they have a problem with their child living with them, they need to straight up tell that to their children instead of trying to live off of them. Contributing to utilities versus paying actual rent to a parent are very different things. Your ex's partner just doesn't like your son and wants to teach lessons to a literal adult he's not even related to. White Jaded Butterfly says, "Not the a-hole. I find it ridiculous that your ex thinks it was suspicious that your son was able to pay the $1,000. She knows $1,000 is too much for him, yet she and her husband still decided to charge him that amount. She set your son up for failure." Creepy Addict says, "Not the a-hole. How is it undermining her parenting? He's paying the rent, just not how she wants. Because now he can save up and move out. Then she won't have extra play money. You should also state he is paying rent with his money, and you're giving him an allowance to do what he wants."